Hello and welcome. I am the Letter Hack, and with me now for the next installment in the ongoing Real Deal series. I love that name, where I bring on guests to help me sort out the reality of regretful Trump voters. Please welcome returning guest and political commentator Dieter McBusiness. Dieter, thanks for being here. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me, Letter Hack. I appreciate it.
And it's early on the left coast, as we call it.
It is. It
So
is,
I
but I like
appreciate
starting
you.
my day. Yeah, no, this is a great way to start my day. I love it, man. Talking with a fellow East Coaster. Are you on I-95?
No.
No, you're inland, right?
Yeah, well, I am I'm in what they call the upstate of South Carolina. It
Right.
is almost Tennessee.
Okay.
Or no, it's almost Georgia. Sorry. We are yeah, we're far away from everything, but I did grow up in Maryland, so I'm familiar with 95. That's where your parents take you to break you in when you're getting your
Yep.
license. They go, "Oh, you want to see what driving could be like? Check this
Yeah.
out."
Yeah,
As
check out
close as you're
95.
getting to the Autobahn or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, well, look, so we're here today to check my cynicism and keep me from drifting off into fantasy lefty land, where
Sure.
I believe something that may or may not be true just based on, my own cynical nature. The more we hear about so-called regretful Trump voters and MAGAs supposedly finding
I
themselves
know.
in the F around and find out phase,
Right.
I keep scratching my head, and they're mostly anonymous sources. There are a few actual and anonymous sources, anonymous quotes, and so I wonder if they are even real at all, or if this is the mainstream media's attempt at creating headlines around manufactured hot topics. What do you think? Is there any validity to that, or am I being cynical? Are they real people filled with regret, or what?
So I think the question is whatever percentage of Trump voters from this most recent election regret their vote, what percentage of them are really going to consider voting Democrat next cycle, whether it
Ah,
be in the midterms or in 2028? And I think it's a very small percentage. I'm actually with you with your cynicism. I think no matter what their expressed regrets are now, they might vote against Trump in 26, and he might lose the House. But JD Vance runs, or if Trump runs again in 28, I think they're going to find a reason to vote for him. I think they're going to find a reason to not vote for the Democrats for the most part. It'll probably be enough to sway the election. I think 2028 will be a lot like 2008, where W was radioactive by the end of his second term, and whoever that Democratic nominee was going to be president, whether it was Obama or Clinton. So I think this 2028 primary will be the exact same thing. Whoever comes out of that Democratic Party primary will win the election, but I don't think they'll win because of Trump converts. I think they'll win because of turnout.
so I hate to imagine this out loud, but let's imagine Donald Trump and this administration somehow, some way don't allow for legit elections or elections at all in 2028. Let's just say that's the case. Do people who voted for him previously go, no, that's fine, we'll have a king? Or do you think that they revolt in some way?
I think the vast majority are in the cult. I think that the best way to define MAGA, I do this on my show, as I say, there's a famous acting coach named Stanislavski who said that generality is the death of art, which implies that specificity is the key to a good story. Well, if you work with people in business too, you find out that specificity is the key to great analysis. So, who are MAGA? I did a whole series on this. Who are MAGA? Who are these people? How can you identify them outside of if they're not wearing a MAGA hat or a MAGA shirt, right? And I say there are four groups. One is heartless one percenters, the billionaire class. It's really the heartless 0.1 percenters, and they're in control of the party. Their agenda is what reigns supreme in terms of the purpose of the GOP, right? lower taxes for one percenters and corporations, excessive military spending, deregulation, and politicization of our courts according to right-wing fundamentalist Christian values. That for that reason, and then so that's one group. That's the most important, powerful group. And then the other three groups are like three overlapping circles in a Venn diagram, where some of them are one, some of them are two, some of them are all three. It's Confederate flag waving, Bible beating, gun nuts. Those three types of people will never vote Democrat. The Bible beaters because of abortion, the Confederate flag wavers because of the racism, and the gun nuts because of the NRA's extremely good job of installing paranoia into the public psyche of all gun owners, thinking that any new gun law is a bad gun law. So when you define MAGA, the MAGA base, the core of MAGA, as heartless one percenters manipulating Confederate flag waving, Bible beating gun nuts into voting against their socioeconomic interests, then I think you can get down to the core of what the Republican Party really is. And if you look at the numbers, and the election denial from 2020 was the best way to do this. At that point in time, it was about 2/3 of the GOP was Confederate flag waving, Bible beating gun nuts. This most recent election implies that it's closer to like 75%, maybe as high as 80% right now. Now, those people are never moving. So I think to your overall point of these regretful Trump voters, there's anywhere from 5 to 15 to 20% maybe of the voters that came out in 2024 that are maybe willing to consider at this moment voting Democrat or not voting Republican. But again, like I said, I grew up in a conservative household. You're in a conservative area. Their feelings change. Their in the moment feelings can be swayed. What they're feeling now, they are so susceptible to mass mediated manipulation that they could forget about the tariffs. Like, oh, the tariffs weren't so bad, and Biden's was worse, or transgender, women in men's sports, or transgender men in women's sports. Like, they get distracted so easily that they're not reliable. So I think you're wise in that mainstream media keeps putting all the attention on the regretful Trump voters. And it's like, well, what about the people who said, I told you so? What about the people who said that Trump was going to be a disaster? What about the people that said that Project 2025 was for real? I mean, Indivisible, who you might have heard of, hosted a webinar not soon after Trump got elected, and people were starting to express regret for voting for him. And he said, don't tell people I told you so. And I was like, actually, that's exactly what I want to do right now, so that we can get them kind of tenderized and ready to admit that their entire worldview is flawed. And that's what I worry long term about MAGA is I think MAGA has the obvious potential to be a verdict on the alt-right, on the extreme right. But I have a feeling 2, 4, 8 years from now, conservatism is still going to have a legitimate intellectual foothold in public discourse. Extreme conservatism's bad, but good conservatism is moderate conservatism. And I'm here to say no. This MAGA is a verdict on all of conservatism. It is the natural devolution of conservatism into fascism. There is nothing good about blind faith resistance to change in a world that is defined by change. Our entire world, our entire global economy, our entire society is defined by change. So we should be predisposed to embrace it, not to resist it. It should be, the conversation should be, what kind of change do we want in this country, as opposed to, do we even want change? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you make some great points. And I see two things happening a lot. One, in my personal sphere on the street where I live, and the other is in the mainstream media and the narratives that are built up in online. Uh, on a personal ground level view, I see people saying Trump has a plan. I don't understand it, but he has a plan. And that sounds exactly like what overtly religious people say about God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, they took away a loved one at an early age, but I trust that he has a plan. I just don't understand it because we're not supposed to understand it. And that leads me to recalling the notion that if it is a cult, it's very religion like, and that a step away from Trump and what they see as good is only a step toward evil, not toward something that could also be good, just different in terms of policy and legislation. So it's
Right.
very muddy and weird and becomes mystical, and I don't like that at all. And I am starting to be of the mind where I can just say, hey, um, I disqualify you from even having a casual conversation about this topic.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm walking away. You
Good.
need to learn more before you can talk about this. And then the other thing that's happening is like you were saying, the media just cannot help but make the case for good Republicans
Right.
or misunderstood voters or voters who misunderstood. And it's just a way of keeping basically just like more white conservative Republican voices in the spotlight before, during, and after elections. And I
Yes.
wonder if they are critical. Let's say that they are critical of the way things are going. Are they likely to employ a scapegoat like Elon Musk or ICE and say, look, they're just doing things too broadly. It needs to be more with a scalpel or more surgical for it to work right. And that's not Trump's fault. Do you think
Yeah.
that they are
Yes.
likely to say, oh, it's Musk, not Trump or
Yes.
something?
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable expectation. Look, there's I try to simplify things down, and I'm realizing that I'm actually pretty good at it with metaphors. But essentially, MAGA are overgrown children with votes and guns, intellectually, emotionally, even spiritually. They're underdeveloped human beings. Now, you can treat a child who's throwing a temper tantrum, in a number of different ways. But what the mainstream media does is, oh, are you okay? Oh, are you okay? How are you
Right.
feeling today, conservatives? Are you ready to kind of get with change? Because we've been trying to get you with change for 45 years and you're still not listening, right? That's one way to treat a child throwing a temper tantrum. That's the wrong way. Okay, the right way is go to your room. When you calm down, then we will talk and I will explain to you why you can't get what you want when you want it. That's how you treat a child throwing a temper tantrum. And that's what we need to do to MAGA. Sit down, shut up, let the smart people go to work. And I'm not seeing anybody on the left really take that approach. What I'm seeing is a lot of Bernie and AOC going into these areas. Some of them are friendly, some of them are not so friendly in terms of just the red or blue area that they're in, right? The voting demographic that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going on the attack. They're saying, "Oh, this is what the government does." It's like an educational tour where they're having to educate people, give people a crash course in the fundamentals of government
You think
and
it's
why
hand
government's
holding?
important. Yes, there it is. That's a good way of putting it. It's like putting your arm around him. Oh, I know it's okay. I know you fucked up. Let me help you. It's like, no, no, no. Shut up. Here's how you like. I was taught in a very simple but hard way growing up. Here's what you're doing wrong. Here's how to do it better. Like that was the teaching methodology because I'm the teacher and you're the student. And that's the dynamic that I want to see the left take is invoke superiority. And it's not that we're superior citizens because we're so amazing. It's we're superior citizens simply because we didn't vote for fascism and we didn't try to rationalize fascism. We saw fascism coming. So if you want to help make America great, listen, because you have a lot to learn about the structure and forms of government and you are still stuck in the past with
You know,
this fairy tale of America
yeah,
at one point being a fair and equal opportunity society, and it's garbage.
where it was, more racist than ever. But I think that the other thing that the media should be doing is saying, "I told you so" on our behalf. They should be saying, it shouldn't just be former CNN host Don Lemon who on his own podcast going, "I think maybe I am progressive. Huh? Maybe I should have listened to progressives more when I had that mainstream job." They should be saying, okay, I admit failure, which is hard to do and probably not likely, but maybe we shouldn't have been condemning progressives as hurting the Democrats'
Right.
chances at beating Republicans when in fact they did that to themselves by not listening to progressives. There's
That's
the
right.
"I told you so" in a more articulate way that I think could be in attack ads, could be flooding the zone with that sort of messaging.
Yes.
And so okay, let's say that maybe some of these folks are coming to their senses. Maybe some of these folks are pissed off. I mean, we see them at town halls. There are a few people in articles where their spouses have been taken away from them and deported or detained at a minimum. And they're like, they were going through the process of immigration. What's the deal? Well, the deal is that this is all bullshit and unfair, and you're just finding out. But they also will say, I'm not necessarily changing my vote. It's just my right to be upset in this moment.
Right.
And me, and the spotlight's on me. So, can we exploit those potential fractures by getting these folks, whether it's at a big level, like through campaigning or something like that, or the protest, or even just like at church, in the grocery store, at work, your neighbors? Can we get these people? Can we easily convince them that now is the moment where they need to join us on certain policy instead
Yeah.
of just saying, well, you shouldn't have voted that way. Maybe you should vote differently next time. Can we move them to call their representatives and
Mm.
make demands and show up at their offices and do more transactional advocacy for certain policy that we are already agreeing with? Because, at the end of the day, populism is progressive policy.
Yes.
It's just
Sure is.
fake. So, I mean,
Sure is.
if can we, and how do you think we could do that?
If the Democratic Party can successfully rebrand itself as a post-Clinton, a post-Obama, a post-Biden, a post-neoliberal party, if that progressive message can include the distinction between neoliberal and progressive, because I believe that most people on the left who consider themselves liberal, because what does that word even mean anymore? If you actually sat them down and talked about policies, they'd be progressive. By like your Don Lemon example, he's like, oh, well, I've looked at these policies and it's basically FDR's second Bill of Rights. And why not? These things all sound like a pretty good society. Why wouldn't we be for these things? So I think it has to do with rebranding. Now, the best way to rebrand an institution is to rebrand its people, meaning replace its people. So I think if the Democratic Party can get generational change within the ranks of the party, at least going to Gen Xers, preferably, I think we need to leapfrog Gen Xers and go right to millennials, because I think Gen Xers are too capitalist. And I think millennials are the most empathetic generation since the greatest generation. For a variety of reasons. We're children of 9/11, the 2008 housing crisis. Like, we have gotten a raw deal a number of times, and we're very aware of what the baby boomers did. Resentment and blame have a place in American politics. In fact, they have a really big place. And I talk about it in the Why Kamala Lost episode of losers do not deserve our sympathy, because losers are people that could win but don't, because they don't learn from their previous losses. So blame it on the baby boomers. The baby boomer conservatives are sociopaths. The baby boomer liberals are losers. They didn't do enough to keep at bay conservative messaging, or conservative policy. So to answer your question, I think it's possible, But the question is, does the Democratic Party have the balls to start encouraging younger, angrier, sexier nominees like Kat Abu-Ghazalia out of Illinois? Do they have the guts to start to not only accept that these primary challenges are going to happen, but to even encourage them? And the Democratic Party has a culture of deference to established power. So if you're trying to primary someone who's established, I mean, it's still haunting AOC that she took out Nancy Pelosi's good friend and Joe Crowley, So there needs to be a huge amount of change in terms of the brand, and that has to do with coming to terms with the legacy of the baby boomer Democratic Party. And I say that politics is Star Wars, policy is Star Trek, political marketing is Jurassic Park, because you got to kill dinosaurs.
That's awesome.
And the dinosaurs that we got to kill right now are Reagan and Clinton. Reagan, government is not the problem. Conservatism is the problem. Government is good because people are good. That's how you deal with Reagan. Clinton, you took the party of FDR and transformed it into the party of conservative capitulation.
Yeah.
And you stole the brand. I mean, undoing the Telecom Act, repealing of Glass-Steagall. These were FDR moments of history that really protected the American public from the exploitation of capitalism. And what did Clinton do? He caved on all of them. The era of big government is over. This is the essay that I'm working on now, the DNC divide, the neoliberalism versus progressivism. And I think if more people knew what that distinction was, then they would consider themselves progressive and they would be on board. So if you can convince most of America that this is a new Democratic Party, that this is an angrier Democratic Party, this is a Democratic Party that's not going to be afraid to call stupid, that's not going to be afraid to call ignorant. It's not going to be afraid to call Marjorie Taylor Greene a white trash demon. Enough. The Republican Party is an instrument of evil. There is nothing good that comes from working with it. And bipartisanship is dead. And that's the real mechanical adjustment that I think we need to see in the Democratic Party is no more bipartisanship. If we have any power, we are going to use it to restrain the Republican Party because there's nothing good that comes from it. Nothing.
Yeah. When they're in the minority, the Democratic Party could at least turn Congress into a procedural minefield where nothing gets done. But instead, they start cooperating. I think that look, I got to find this study. I got to track this down and do a segment on it. If you're going to be sympathetic about any voting generation of voters, it might be Gen X, because there's a study that showed that in terms of lead poisoning, they suffered the most, and that might explain a lot. Crime rates, poor voting choices now, current day. But I also want to start every conversation with conservatives with, look, I hate Hillary Clinton too. I don't like Chuck Schumer either. I think Nancy Pelosi is a useless, multimillionaire benefiting from insider trading as well. There are things that we agree on that we can easily just kind of get out of the way and then move on to, but you get mail. You want the post office to come to your rural grandmother's house and give her medication, right? We have to fight for that shit. So I think there are things that we can immediately find common ground on and then start to.
But you got to kill Reagan there. You got to kill Reagan there.
You need to massage that in. Yeah.
They are convinced that government is the problem, because who doesn't hate the DMV? Who doesn't hate paying their taxes?
When it's run by the people, when it's by and for the people, it is good. Government isn't, this form of government is bought off and paid for. It's not actually what government is. And so you can't paint government in general as bad. I don't like American imperialism. That doesn't mean that I don't like America. You know what I
Right.
mean? So there are things worth fighting for. And otherwise, why are we having the conversation, buddy? Right? Well, that's what I would say to the person. Why are we talking about this at all if it doesn't matter? So look,
Well, that's the thing is there's three different ways of handling MAGA. There's, inquire, where you just ask them questions because they're not really interested in your perspective. They just want to talk. And eventually you can get them with good questions. You can get them to trip over their own logic. There's ignore, which is just, you just don't even look at them. And that's probably the attitude I suggest for most people, because MAGA is looking for a fight and it can be dangerous, especially if you're in a red area. And then there's exclude, which is actually the political posture that I want the left to take, which is the politics of exclusion. This is if I were to run for office, my value proposition would be, I don't have all the answers, but I do know that if we get the heartless 1%ers and the Confederate flag waving, Bible beating gun nuts out of the room, the decisions that we start making together will be a lot better than if they were in the room, right? One bad apple spoils the bunch. One bad team member ruins the team. There's a saying in business, you want to get a deal done, get the lawyers out of the room. Well, now it's get the conservatives out of the room in American politics.
It's regretful or not, there are some people that you can't work with because they're not workable. They will not work with you. Hey, I like the idea of you running for Congress. I like the idea of you being involved in politics.
I'd love to. Unfortunately, the timing isn't right for me right now, just due to life circumstances. My parents are dying down the street. The incumbent in my district is very strong. And so in order to primary someone like that, I would probably have a better chance in a presidential election year, because primary turnout in presidential election years is so much better. But yeah, I'm a creature of I-95, being from the Boston area. Washington is, I would be like coming home if I were to run for Congress, to come into Washington. It's like, spend a ton of time there. I love it. And I'm a lot smarter on DC politics than I am California state politics, because California state politics is a beast, isn't it? It's an absolute beast.
I mean, and either way, I mean, if you wait too long, you'll just end up one of the generals for the Rebel Alliance in the actual
exactly
post-democracy apocalypse. So that would not be bad either. But I hope it doesn't come to that. Look, thanks for coming on today. There's links in the description for your content, how to follow you on social media. Anything you want to plug before we wrap?
No, please, if you come to my channel, just start checking out the early essays that I did in my videos catalog. I'm pretty proud of those. They deconstruct conservatism. They get specific with MAGA. They go into the Confederate flag waving, Bible beating gun nuts labels that I talked about. And the revolution is coming, y'all. It's just, I wish, if I were running in Boston, if I was living in Boston right now, I would definitely be running. I would move to a district that was friendly to me, and I would definitely be running. But no, thanks for having me on, Letterhack. I really appreciate it. And, let's do it again soon. But if you do go to my channel, anybody who's watching, please check out my early essays, because that's my best stuff. And I go live either Monday or Tuesday nights around 7 p.m. Pacific for Left Coast Live.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, man. Have a great day.
All right. You too.
Take care. Yeah, early morning for Dieter. That's what happens when I get my guests on from the left coast. They get up bright and early to be here, and I'm very appreciative, especially when the conversation is as good as that one was. We're going to keep having these conversations with other guests. I have them lined up.